Welcome to Surface Knowledge, the only podcast that provides you with useless information for a useful reason. Never again be stuck without an interesting tidbit or fun fact in any social situation. Here's your host, Max Kurton.
Hello everybody and welcome back to this week's episode of Surface Knowledge. Now, today's episode we're going to be looking at the surface knowledge of video game history. And this is obviously a topic that a vast majority of people are familiar with, but I'm just going to try and approach it from a slightly different angle and hopefully give you some lesser known facts. Now, before we get started, quick disclaimer as always, in the world of internet and disinformation, not everything you hear is always going to be 100% factual. Going to do my best to research thoroughly, but if I make a small mistake, please don't shoot me, and always do your own research. If you happen to be an expert on the matter, please feel free to reach out. Always happy to make corrections. And keep in mind that this is surface knowledge, which means that we're not going to cover every single detail, especially a topic as vast as this. So there are plenty of deep dive podcasts, and also on the GT5 Network, we have a gaming podcast called Game Till 5, so you can always go check that out for more information. Okay, let's go! Now, the story of video games doesn't actually start with what you would think of the arcades of the 70s and 80s. It actually begins back in the 1950s and 60s with early computer-based experiments. The first kind of known interactive electronic game was Tennis for Two, which came out in 1958, and it was created by physicist William Higginbotham. And he used a oscilloscope? Not 100% sure how you pronounce it, but he used that to make it. A few years later, there was Space War, which came out in 1962, and it became one of the first computer games played on research computers at universities. And early video games were actually often tied to military research. The rise of computing technology during the Cold War led to the development of computers like the Whirlwind and the PDP-1, which were the only ones at the time powerful enough to run these kind of basic interactive programs. So these early games weren't just for entertainment, they were used to kind of showcase the capabilities of this new computing technology so they can get funding and grow from there. So even though games did start in labs, it wasn't until the 1970s that it became widely accessible to everyone else. And the first commercially successful arcade game was Pong, which came out in 1972 and was created by Atari and designed by Alan Alcorn. Now, you've obviously probably seen it once in your life of a simple table tennis game, but it was a massive success and it sparked the beginning of that arcade boom, which people associate with the 70s and 80s. Then later in the 70s, we had Space Invaders, which came out in 1978, and that was developed by Taito. And this took arcades to a whole new level of popularity. This was such a hit in Japan that it reportedly caused a coin shortage. And then soon after that, we had other legendary titles like Pac-Man in 1980, Donkey Kong in 1981, and Galaga in 1981 as well. And this really helped solidify video games as a major entertainment medium. Side fact about Pac-Man, he was originally called Puck-Man in Japan, but the name was changed for international release to prevent vandals from alternating the P into an F on arcade machines, because we can't be trusted to have anything nice, so Puck-Man was the original. Although arcades were booming, gaming truly became a household pastime when they introduced home consoles. And the first home console was the Magnavox Odyssey, which came out in 1972, and it was designed by Ralph H. Baer. It was a rudimentary system and it used screen overlays and simple light-based gameplay. However, the home gaming system didn't really take off until the release of the Atari 2600, which was in 1977, and it popularized the cartridge-based system, which many people grew to love over the coming decades. This allows people to kind of play multiple games on one device. You had titles like Pitfall in 1982 and Adventure in 1980, and these set the stage for console gaming as we kind of know it today. Now, the original Atari joystick was designed after military flight controls to make it feel more interactive and intuitive. Fun side fact. So, with success, there obviously comes oversaturation with anything. By the early 1980s, The market was absolutely flooded with all of these poorly made games and really low quality consoles as everyone tried to jump on the bandwagon, basically. So this actually led to the video game crash of 1983, where consumer confidence just plummeted and major companies suffered massive losses, and many assumed that video games was just a passing fad and now it was over with. One of the biggest failures of this time was E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which came out in 1982. This game was so poorly designed and rushed that thousands of unsold cartridges were buried in a landfill in New Mexico. Now, this is a story that was long thought to be a myth, throwback to episode 1, but excavations confirmed it in 2014. Then everything changed in 1985 with the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES. This revived the video game industry, and that is not an understatement. Nintendo introduced a quality control system that helped prevent low-quality games from flooding the market. The NES gave us classics like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. This completely revitalized the gaming industry and shaped gaming culture for decades to come. It's almost impossible to ignore the impact that the NES had on the industry. It was released in Japan in 1983 as the Famicom. The console was redesigned and renamed the NES for its release in North America in 1985, and it quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The NES introduced the concept of console bundles as well, where a console was sold with a game included. The bundle for the NES was the system, 2 controllers, and the game Super Mario Bros. It also had a lockout chip that prevented unlicensed games from being played on the console. Now, this actually did lead to a legal battle between Nintendo and a company called Tengen, which resulted in Tengen releasing only 3 games for the console before it went out of business. The NES was also the first console to introduce the concept of saving game progress thanks to the battery backup system in games like Legend of Zelda. And we just keep going on with facts about the NES, but it was the first console to introduce the concept of side-scrolling platforms, thanks to games like Super Mario Bros. And Castlevania. Also introduced the concept of non-linear exploration with games like Legend of Zelda and Metroid that gave players a vast world to conquer and explore. So as you can see, the NES set the standard for the future console generations in terms of hardware and game designs that we're still seeing up until this day. Its use of a controller with a directional pad and buttons set the standard for controllers, and its 8-bit graphics and sound paved the way for future advancements in technology. I do always kind of wonder of an alternative history, where the NES had not been released and had the video game industry not been saved in 1983, like what would it look like today? Who would have taken over? It's interesting to think about. But as technology kind of improved, gaming became more competitive, obviously, because now we know how to make it work and how to make it palatable for the mass market. So the 90s was the first kind of infamous console wars that existed between Nintendo and Sega, with the SNES and Sega Genesis battling for dominance. Sega's marketing campaign, which was Genesis does what Nintendo don't, was one of the most aggressive in gaming history. The mid-90s also saw a dramatic shift in the gaming industry with the explosion of 3D graphics. This was a new technology that allowed for more immersive gameplay, and it created a realistic experience for players. The release of the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation in 1996 brought 3D gaming into the mainstream and helped introduce new gameplay mechanics such as exploration and puzzle solving, in addition to those traditional platforming and action genres. Side fact for you, Final Fantasy VII, the most iconic Final Fantasy game I think most people would agree, was originally planned for the SNES, but after delays and technical difficulties from experimenting with all these different platforms, and most notably the Nintendo 64, it had to be moved to PlayStation due to cartridge storage limitations. Can't imagine putting that many cartridges in an N64. The early 2000s saw the rise of online gaming, with Microsoft launching Xbox Live in 2002, which really helped pave the way for competitive multiplayer experiences. Games like Halo 2 and World of Warcraft really defined online gaming and helped build a dedicated player community. Modern gaming as we know it today has kind of expanded into virtual reality, cloud gaming, esports. You've got franchises like Call of Duty, Fortnite, Minecraft, and they just continue to shape the industry with the help of streaming services like Twitch, which makes gaming more social than ever before. So as video games continue to evolve, we're seeing more and more gaming being done on mobile devices as well. The impact of mobile gaming on the industry has been huge, and it's changing the way we play and think about games going forward. The first mobile game that was ever released was actually in 1994, and it was on the Haganuk MT2000 mobile, and it was Tetris. Mobile gaming is such a huge market. In-game advertising has $110 billion in revenue, billion in 2024, which is expected to reach $170 billion by 2029. Mobile games will secure $118 billion in 2024 and are expected to expand by up to $156 billion by 2029. In 2016, if we can all remember that glorious time when Pokemon Go took the world by storm, it became the fastest mobile game to reach $1 billion in revenue. And the most popular mobile games in the world is PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, with over 1 billion downloads. So it's no surprise that the rise of mobile gaming has had such a magnificent and significant impact on the traditional gaming industry. This has actually led to a decline in sales for our consoles and a shift in the way that people consume games. Mobile gaming has proven to be popular, accessible alternatives to traditional consoles, and its convenience, its affordability, has kind of attracted a wider audience which might not have got into gaming before or maybe looked down on it, gives them access to it at any point in their lives. So with that fact of mobile gaming growing in popularity and the fact that console sales have been declining, it's actually true that console sales have been declining for several years, with the trend only accelerating in recent years. According to data from the MPD Group in 2020, total spending on video game hardware, software, and accessories in the US fell by 2% from the previous year, with console hardware sales experiencing a 22% decline. In contrast to that, spending on mobile gaming has increased by 25%, with mobile game spending now accounting for more than half of all spending on video games. And I think one of the main reasons for the decline in console sales is that shift away in how people consume games. Mobile games are easily accessible, they're in your pocket at all times. They're on a device that people already own. This convenience has made them popular with casual gamers who've never had the time or interest or want to invest in a traditional console, which, let's be honest, are expensive and you do need to kind of sit and dedicate time to them. Additionally, mobile games are often free or very inexpensive, and they can make profit from in-app purchases and everything like that, and that makes them an appealing alternative to those high cost of console games, where if you're looking at a new game, you're spending £60-70 per game. So therefore, the popularity of mobile gaming has led to a rise in casual games, which are designed to be played in short bursts and require little investment in terms of time or money. These games often have simple mechanics and can be played without a great deal of skill or strategy, making them accessible to pretty much everyone. So we've kind of gone a little bit back to how video games first started, if you think about it. Another way that mobile gaming has kind of impacted the traditional gaming industry is by changing the way that they are designed and marketed. Many games are now being designed with mobile platforms in mind. We've got features such as microtransactions, social media integration, and these are becoming increasingly more common. Some companies have even shifted their focus entirely to mobile gaming and abandoned traditional consoles altogether. But despite the decline in console sales, traditional consoles are still such an important part of the gaming industry. They continue to offer high quality graphics, immersive gameplay, and a level of complexity that you cannot even come close to on mobile games. And also, many gamers prefer the tactile experience of playing on a console and enjoy the social aspect of gaming with friends and family. So there we go. From lab military experiments to billion-dollar franchises, the history of video games is filled with innovation, competition, and surprises. So whether you grew up on arcade classics, 8-bit adventures, or more modern battle royales, gaming has had an undeniable impact on pop culture. So before we say goodbye to this episode of Surface Knowledge on a history of video games, I found a couple of final fun facts if you can't retain everything from this episode today. The Sega Dreamcast was released in 1998, one of my favorite consoles, and was the first console to come with a built-in modem for online play. The first handheld video game console was the Microvision, and it was released in 1979, and it had interchangeable cartridges and was developed by Milton Bradley. The first console that was allowing wireless controllers was the Atari 2600, with the release of the Atari CX42 joysticks in 1982. The first 3D game was 3D Monster Maze and was released for the Sinclair ZX81 computer in 1981. And the first massively multiplayer online game, MMO, was called Habitat, and it was created by Lucasfilms Games in 1986. So the game industry has always been innovating and coming up with new ideas, even when you think it was in its infancy back in the 80s and 70s. A lot of what we use today was being developed back then. So I think it's exciting to look forward as we think of how we are now with VR and interactivity, where the gaming industry is going to head. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, well under the 30-minute challenge on this one. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed just a little tidbit of this episode. And I'll, of course, be back next week with our next episode where we will gain a surface knowledge understanding of the North Pole. Until next time, folks.
You've been listening to the Surface Knowledge Podcast, part of the GT5 Network. Be sure to subscribe and rate on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. We'll see you back here soon for another episode. Until next time, stay curious.